The Golden Cage. The Gilded Prison. The year was 1925, and Manhattan's skyline was a jagged crown of steel and ambition. In the heart of Fifth Avenue stood the Hartwell Mansion, a limestone palace that whispered of old money and older secrets. Inside this fortress of marble and mahogany lived Elena Hartwell, the last daughter of the Hartwell dynasty, a girl wrapped in silk but suffocating in gold. Elena was 23 years old, with hair the color of autumn chestnuts and eyes that held the restless hunger of a caged bird. The society pages called her the Diamond of Fifth Avenue. Her father's fortune, built on railroads and steel, made her the most sought-after bride in New York. But Elena didn't want to be sought. She wanted to be seen. Every morning, she would wake in her canopy bed, surrounded by French wallpaper and crystal chandeliers, and feel absolutely nothing. Her life was a series of tea parties, charity galas, and carefully arranged encounters with suitable young men. Men with names like Bradford and Montgomery. Men who smelled of expensive cologne and spoke in careful sentences about stocks and inheritances. The Artist in the Rain. Everything changed on a Tuesday in October. Elena had escaped her governess, Miss Pritchard, by claiming a headache. Instead of resting, she slipped out the servant's entrance wearing a simple wool coat, her hair tucked under a plain hat. She walked through Central Park, breathing the air of freedom, when the rain began to fall. She ran for shelter under a stone bridge, and that's where she found him. A man stood before an easel, completely absorbed in his work, oblivious to the rain that was beginning to soak his canvas. He wore a paint-stained shirt and worn trousers, and his dark hair curled at his collar, wet from the storm. "Your painting will be ruined," Elena called out. He turned, and she forgot how to breathe. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and electric. His face was all sharp angles and shadows, with a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, a white line that told stories of pain. "Then it will be a painting of the rain," he said simply, turning back to his work. Elena found herself moving closer, drawn by curiosity and something deeper. She looked at the canvas and gasped. He wasn't painting the park or the trees. He was painting loneliness itself, dark colors swirling into shapes that felt like sadness made visible. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's honest," he corrected. "I'm Daniel. Daniel Cross." Elena hesitated. In this moment, under this bridge, she could be anyone. "I'm Elena. Just Elena." The secret season. That meeting became the first of many. Elena began to slip away whenever she could, meeting Daniel at his studio in Greenwich Village. The studio was a cramped attic room that smelled of turpentine and coffee, with windows that looked out over the chaotic streets below. It was nothing like her mansion, and it was everything she'd ever wanted. Daniel taught her to see the world differently. He showed her how light could be a color, how shadows told stories, how beauty lived in broken things. She would sit for hours watching him paint, and slowly, carefully, she began to paint herself. Her first attempts were clumsy, but Daniel never laughed. "Art isn't about perfection," he told her, his hand guiding hers across the canvas. "It's about truth. What does your heart want to say?" "It wants to scream," Elena admitted, surprising herself. "Then let it scream in color." But they didn't only paint. They talked. Elena told him about the suffocating weight of expectations, the way her father had already promised her hand to Bradford Ashworth III, a man she barely knew and certainly didn't love. She told him about feeling invisible in plain sight. Daniel told her about growing up on the streets, about fighting for every scrap of food, every moment of warmth. He told her about the fire that had scarred his face and killed his mother, about the years he'd spent learning to turn pain into beauty. "You're the bravest person I know," Elena said one evening as they sat on the fire escape, sharing a bottle of cheap wine. "I'm terrified every day," Daniel confessed. "But fear doesn't own me anymore." That night, under a sky full of stars and factory smoke, Daniel kissed her. It was nothing like the polite pecks she'd received from society boys. It was wild and desperate and real. Elena kissed him back, tasting freedom and danger and possibility. The dangerous dance. For 6 months, Elena lived 2 lives. By day, she was the perfect daughter, attending luncheons and smiling at Bradford Ashworth's dull conversations about market trends. By night, she was Daniel's muse and student, alive in ways she'd never imagined possible. She gave Daniel money, though he hated accepting it. For supplies, she insisted. For your art. But really, she gave it because she wanted to take care of him the way he'd taken care of her broken spirit. Daniel used the money well. His paintings began to attract attention. A small gallery in Soho agreed to show his work. Elena attended the opening in disguise, wearing a simple dress and a veil, watching from the shadows as the art world discovered what she'd known all along. Daniel Cross was brilliant. But brilliance attracts attention, and attention breeds danger. The proposal. One evening, as winter began to claw at the city, Daniel took Elena to the rooftop of his building. He'd set up candles in glass jars, and a blanket was spread over the tar paper. The city sprawled below them, a galaxy of electric lights. Elena, he said, taking her hands. I know I have nothing. I live in an attic. I eat bread and paint for dinner. But I love you more than I've ever loved anything, even my art. Run away with me. We'll go west, to California, where nobody knows your name or mine. We'll be free. Elena's heart soared and shattered simultaneously. She looked at this man who'd given her everything that mattered and nothing that her world valued. She thought of her father, who would disown her. She thought of the scandal, the shame, the whispers. Then she thought of Bradford Ashworth's cold hands and colder eyes. She thought of 50 more years in her golden cage. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Daniel. 1,000 times yes. He pulled out a ring. It wasn't a diamond. It was a simple silver band with a tiny chip of turquoise. It was my mother's, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The only thing I have left of her. Elena let him slide it onto her finger, and she wept. Not sad tears, but tears of relief and joy and terrified hope. The betrayal shadow. They planned their escape for the following week. Elena would stage a visit to her aunt in Boston, but instead, she and Daniel would catch a train west. She began gathering her jewelry to sell, pieces she could sneak out without raising suspicion. She was packing a small bag in her bedroom when her father, Thomas Hartwell, walked in without knocking. He was a tall man with steel-gray hair and eyes like winter ice. Going somewhere, daughter? His voice was deceptively calm. Father, I was just organizing. Don't lie to me. He threw a folder on her bed. Photographs spilled out. Pictures of Elena and Daniel, kissing on the fire escape, holding hands in the park, sitting in his studio. Someone had been following her. Elena's blood turned to ice. Who is he? Her father demanded. Someone I love, Elena said, forcing strength into her voice. Thomas laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Love? You foolish child. Do you know who Daniel Cross really is? I know everything about him. Do you know his real name is Daniel Crosswell? Do you know he's the son of Marcus Crosswell, the man who tried to blackmail me 15 years ago? The man I had thrown in prison, where he died? The room tilted. What? Your precious artist is the son of a criminal. And I'll wager everything I own that he knows exactly who you are and has been planning this from the beginning. No, Elena whispered, but doubt crept into her heart like poison. There's more. Her father pulled out another photograph. Daniel, in an expensive suit, entering a building. The caption read, Daniel Cross, heir to the Vandermeer fortune, photographed with fiancée Claudette Vandermeer. Elena's knees gave out. She sat hard on the bed, staring at the image. He's been engaged for 2 years, her father said coldly. To the Vandermeer girl. He's playing you, Elena. He's been playing you from the start, probably to get revenge for his father. Or maybe just to access my money. I don't believe you. Then ask him yourself. But you won't, because you know I'm right. The unraveling. Elena didn't go to Daniel. Instead, she hired a private investigator. The truth came back in files and photographs, each page a dagger to her heart. Daniel Cross was indeed Daniel Crosswell, son of Marcus. He was engaged to Claudette Vandermeer, though he'd kept that relationship quiet. He'd deposited Elena's money into an account under another name. He'd been seen with his fiancée multiple times during the months he'd claimed to love only Elena. The investigator's final report included an overheard conversation between Daniel and an unknown man. She's completely in love with me. By the time I'm done, I'll have enough of Hartwell's money to expose him for what he really is. My father will be avenged. Elena read the words until they burned into her mind. She sat in her golden bedroom, in her golden cage, and something inside her died. But something else was born. Something cold and sharp and unbreakable. She took off the turquoise ring and stared at it. A lie wrapped in silver. A promise wrapped in betrayal. The transformation begins. The next day, Elena went to Daniel's studio for the last time. She wore her finest dress, her hair perfectly arranged, every inch the diamond of Fifth Avenue. Daniel greeted her with a smile. "Elena, I was worried you'd." She slapped him. The sound echoed in the small studio. "I know," she said simply. "I know about Claudette. I know about your father. I know about the money. I know about everything." Daniel's face went white, then red. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. "Elena, I can explain." "Don't." Her voice was ice. "You wanted revenge on my father for what he did to yours. You wanted to humiliate me, use me, destroy my family's name. You wanted money and you wanted blood. Fine. You'll get what you wanted." "What does that mean?" Elena smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "It means the game isn't over, Daniel. It's just beginning. You taught me to see beauty in broken things. Let me show you what a broken woman can become." She walked out, leaving him standing among his paintings, the turquoise ring on his table, the phoenix rising, the morning period. Elena Hartwell did not cry after leaving Daniel's studio. She returned to the mansion, walked past her father without a word, and locked herself in her bedroom for 3 days. The servants whispered. Her father knocked, but received no answer. Miss Pritchard worried that the girl might do something drastic. But Elena wasn't breaking. She was rebuilding. On the first day, she burned every sketch she'd made, every letter Daniel had written, every memory she could hold in her hands. She watched the paper curl and blacken in her fireplace, imagining his lies turning to ash. On the second day, she cut her hair. The long chestnut waves that Daniel had loved to touch fell to the floor in heavy chunks. When she finished, her reflection showed a stranger with a sharp bob that framed her face like a blade. She looked modern. She looked dangerous. On the third day, she made a list, not of feelings or memories, but of names, dates, connections, and weaknesses. She wrote down everything she knew about Daniel, about the Vandermeer family, about society's intricate web of secrets and scandals. She became a student of revenge. When she finally emerged, her father was waiting in the library. He looked up from his newspaper, and his eyes widened at the sight of her transformation. "Elena, I'll marry Bradford Ashworth," she said without preamble. "Set the date for spring." Thomas Hartwell studied his daughter. The soft, dreamy girl who'd left this room was gone. In her place stood someone harder, colder, more like him. "What do you want in return?" he asked, because he knew his daughter well enough to know she always wanted something. "I want access to my trust fund. I want a seat on the board of Hartwell Industries. And I want you to teach me everything you know about business, power, and how to destroy a man without anyone knowing it was you." Thomas smiled slowly. "Done." The education of an avenger. The winter of 1926 was Elena's season of learning. Her father proved to be a ruthless teacher, and Elena proved to be an exceptional student. In the mornings, she attended society functions as Bradford's dutiful fiancée, smiling and gracious. In the afternoons, she sat in her father's office, learning the dark arts of business warfare. Information is power, Thomas taught her. But timing is everything. You don't strike when you're angry. You strike when your enemy is most vulnerable. Elena absorbed everything like a sponge. She learned how to read financial statements to spot weaknesses. She learned how to plant stories in newspapers through carefully placed bribes. She learned how to use charm as a weapon and silence as a threat. But she also had her own tutors. She hired a private investigator named Marcus Chun, a brilliant Chinese man who'd been a Pinkerton detective until racism closed that door. Marcus became her eyes and ears, tracking Daniel's every move. The reports came in weekly, and Elena read them with cold precision. Daniel had indeed married Claudette Vandermeer in a quiet ceremony in December. The Vandermeer fortune had elevated him from struggling artist to society darling. His paintings now sold for thousands. He'd opened his own gallery. He wore tailored suits and dined at the finest restaurants. He'd used Elena's money and her connections to build his new life. Every introduction she'd made, every wealthy friend she'd brought to his studio had been a stepping stone. And now he stood at the top, while she'd been left broken in the gutter of his ambition. "He's planning a major exhibition in March," Marcus reported during one meeting. "The Vandermeers are funding it. It's meant to establish him as the premier artist of the modern age. Elena smiled. Perfect. Let him climb higher. The fall will be so much more satisfying. The Gallery of Ghosts. Elena's own transformation was remarkable. She convinced Bradford that she wanted to contribute to society by becoming involved in the arts. Bradford, who had no interest in art but liked the prestige it brought, agreed. With her trust fund and her father's connections, Elena quietly began buying controlling interests in several art galleries and newspapers. She moved carefully, using shell companies and intermediaries so no one would trace the purchases back to her. Within 3 months, she owned stakes in 7 galleries, including the prestigious Morrison Gallery, where Daniel's March exhibition was scheduled. But ownership wasn't enough. Elena needed to understand the art world from the inside. She began attending every exhibition, every auction, every salon. She cultivated relationships with critics, collectors, and curators. She donated generously to museums. She became known as a patron of the arts, a woman of refined taste and deep pockets. Mrs. Ashworth-to-be, one critic gushed at a gallery opening. Your eye for talent is extraordinary. I've had excellent teachers, Elena replied smoothly, thinking of the hours she'd spent in Daniel's studio, learning to see as he saw. She'd use his own lessons to destroy him. The Web Titans. Meanwhile, Elena planted the seeds of Daniel's downfall with surgical precision. She started small. A whisper here, a carefully worded question there. At a dinner party, she mentioned to a gossip columnist, "Isn't it fascinating how Daniel Cross appeared from nowhere? I wonder about his past." To a rival gallery owner, she casually noted, "Some of Cross's techniques seem remarkably similar to the late Robert Beaumont's work. I hope it's homage and not something else." To Claudette Vandermeer's mother at a charity luncheon, she sweetly asked, "How did you and Daniel meet? Love at first sight? Or was it a longer courtship?" planting doubt about the timeline of their relationship. Each seed was carefully placed to grow slowly, invisibly. Elena knew that obvious attacks would be traced back to her. But subtle doubts, whispered questions, tiny inconsistencies, these would spread like poison through the roots of society. She also began collecting Daniel's old paintings, the ones from before he'd met her, using anonymous buyers. She stored them in a warehouse, studying them, comparing them to his newer work. She found what she was looking for, proof that his style had dramatically changed after meeting her, after seeing her collection, after she'd introduced him to certain artists. Marcus Chun earned his salary 10 times over. He discovered that Daniel had indeed targeted Elena deliberately, researching the Hartwell family for months before, accidentally, meeting her in the park. He found evidence of Daniel's engagement to Claudette dating back years, long before Elena. He uncovered payments from Daniel to various individuals, though what those payments were for remained mysterious. "He's building something," Marcus warned. "Some kind of expose about your father. He's been meeting with journalists." "Let him," Elena said calmly. "My father can handle his own battles. I'm focused on Daniel's art career. That's where his pride lives. That's where I'll strike." The auction trap. In February, Elena made her boldest move yet. She arranged for a major auction of significant emerging artists to be held the same week as Daniel's exhibition. She used her influence to ensure it would be the social event of the season, with every major collector in attendance. Then she did something unexpected. She submitted several of Daniel's early paintings, the ones she'd been collecting anonymously, to the auction, but she attributed them to anonymous artist circa 1923. The paintings were beautiful, raw, honest works that showed real pain and talent. They were also drastically different from Daniel's current polished, commercial style. Art critics began to notice. Who was this anonymous artist? They wondered. The emotional depth is stunning. Elena fed the mystery carefully, leaking hints that the artist was someone who'd disappeared from the art world, possibly due to commercialization pressures. When someone finally discovered that the anonymous artist was Daniel Cross himself, the narrative was already set. Daniel had sold his soul for society's approval. His newer work was pretty but empty. His old work had truth. The art world, always hungry for authenticity, began to turn on Daniel even before his grand exhibition opened. The engagement party. Bradford Ashworth insisted on a lavish engagement party in March, the same week as Daniel's exhibition. Elena agreed. and then insisted it be held at the very hotel ballroom overlooking Morrison Gallery. The party was opulent beyond measure. 500 guests, a orchestra, champagne fountains, and flowers shipped from Paris. Elena wore a gown of ice blue silk that made her look like a winter goddess. Her chopped hair was styled in perfect finger waves. Diamond earrings that cost more than Daniel's entire gallery glittered at her ears. Bradford, tall and bland and utterly forgettable, stood beside her as they greeted guests. He was pleased with himself, with his beautiful fiancée, with the envy he saw in other men's eyes. He had no idea that Elena felt absolutely nothing for him. But then the doors opened, and Daniel Cross entered with his wife Claudette. Elena had expected this. She'd made sure they were invited. She wanted this confrontation. Daniel looked prosperous. His suit was perfectly tailored, his scarred face somehow more striking in evening light. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, went wide when he saw Elena. He'd heard she'd cut her hair, heard she was engaged, but seeing her transformed must have been a shock. Claudette Vandermeer Cross was beautiful in a delicate, porcelain way. Blonde, petite, with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. She clutched Daniel's arm possessively. Elena watched them cross the ballroom. She waited. Let him come to her. And he did. Daniel couldn't help himself. He approached with Claudette in tow, and Elena saw the moment he realized the woman standing before him was both the girl he'd known and someone entirely new. "Miss Hartwell," he said formally. "Congratulations on your engagement." "Mrs. Cross," Elena replied, nodding to Claudette first, a deliberate slight to Daniel. "How lovely to meet you. I've heard so much about your family's patronage of the arts. And I've heard about your recent acquisitions," Claudette said, her voice cool. 7 galleries, is it?" Elena smiled. 8, actually. I just purchased the Morrison. I believe your husband has an exhibition there this week." Daniel's face went pale. Elena saw him understand in that instant that she owned the gallery showing his work. She controlled the space where his career would rise or fall. "I'm looking forward to it," Elena continued sweetly. "Though I must say, I've recently fallen in love with the work of an anonymous artist from 1923. Such raw talent. Such honesty. I wonder whatever happened to that artist." Daniel's jaw clenched. Claudette looked confused, but Daniel understood perfectly. Elena had exposed his artistic evolution as a devolution. She'd turned his success into a weakness. "If you'll excuse us," Daniel said tightly, pulling Claudette away. Elena watched them go, her heart beating fast but her face serene. Bradford appeared at her elbow with champagne. "Who was that?" he asked. "Nobody important," Elena said. "Nobody at all. The exhibition disaster." Daniel's exhibition opened 2 days later. Elena attended, of course, with Bradford and half of New York society. The gallery was packed, the champagne flowed, and Daniel's paintings hung on white walls like beautiful corpses. They were technically perfect. Lovely landscapes, elegant portraits, scenes of society life captured in careful brushstrokes. But they were soulless. Next to the raw power of his earlier work, now famous as the anonymous artist pieces, these new paintings looked like expensive decorations. The critics were savage in their reviews. "Daniel Cross has traded his voice for acceptance," wrote the Times critic. "Where is the pain, the passion, the truth that made his early work so compelling?" "Cross's new work is what happens when an artist stops feeling and starts calculating," wrote another. But Elena's cruelest blow came from an unexpected source. She'd arranged for a small exhibition of the anonymous artist works to open the same week, in a tiny gallery in Greenwich Village, the very neighborhood where Daniel had once starved and struggled. The contrast was deliberate and devastating. Critics flocked to the small gallery, praising the raw genius of the early Cross works, while simultaneously panning his current exhibition. Daniel's career didn't collapse immediately, but the cracks began to show. Sales were slower than expected. Collectors who'd promised to buy backed out. The Vandermeers were embarrassed. The first real wound. 1 month after the exhibition, Marcus Chun brought Elena a thick folder. "You need to see this," he said grimly. Inside were photographs and documents that made Elena's blood run cold, then hot with fury. Daniel hadn't just targeted her for revenge or money. He'd been running a longer con. While courting Elena, he'd also been secretly selling forged paintings to her father's business associates, using Elena's unknowing endorsements. When she'd praised his work to wealthy friends, Daniel had approached them later with investment opportunities in rare art that was fake. He used you to establish credibility, Marcus explained. Then he defrauded the very people you introduced him to. If this comes out, it won't just destroy him, it'll destroy your reputation too. Society will think you were part of the scheme. Elena stared at the evidence, understanding the full depth of Daniel's betrayal. He hadn't just broken her heart. He'd made her complicit in his crimes. How many victims? She asked quietly. 17 so far. Total losses around $500,000. Elena felt the old pain try to resurface, but she pushed it down. Pain was weakness. Anger was power. We're going to expose him, she said. But we're going to do it carefully. I want every piece of evidence authenticated. I want legal counsel. And I want to make sure that when this comes out, it's clear I was his victim, not his partner. What about the Vandermeers? They'll be destroyed too. Elena thought of Claudette, the delicate blonde who'd looked at her with such cold superiority. Collateral damage, she said. She chose to marry a con artist. She can suffer the consequences. The unexpected complication. But Elena had made a miscalculation. She'd assumed Claudette was just another foolish society girl, but Claudette Vandermeer Cross was more than she appeared. 2 weeks later, Claudette appeared at Elena's door unannounced. Bradford was out, and Elena was alone in the mansion's music room, playing piano, something she'd taken up to fill the empty hours. Mrs. Ashworth to be, Claudette said, standing in the doorway. We need to talk. Elena's fingers stilled on the keys. About the fact that you're destroying my husband, and I know why. Elena turned slowly. Do you? Claudette crossed the room, and Elena saw that her delicate appearance hid steel. He loved you. I know that. I've always known that. But he married me, and that's what matters. He used me. He used both of us. Claudette's voice was bitter. Did you know our marriage was arranged? My father and his mother planned it before she died in that fire. It was a business arrangement. I was 13 when they betrothed us. Elena felt the ground shift beneath her. What? Daniel Crosswell was never free to love you, no matter how much he wanted to. He was bound by promises made before he was old enough to fight them. So he tried to have both, my family's money and your, whatever it was you gave him. Freedom, maybe. Truth. That doesn't excuse what he did. No, Claudette agreed. But it should complicate your revenge. He's not the only villain in this story, Elena. His mother died in a fire because your father's factory workers went on strike, and someone set a fire as protest. Daniel's father tried to blackmail yours for compensation, for justice, and your father had him killed in prison. Suicide, the official report said, but we both know the truth. Elena's world tilted. My father wouldn't. Your father is ruthless. So is mine. So, I suspect, are you now? We're all monsters in expensive clothes, Elena. The question is, are you going to destroy Daniel for revenge, or are you brave enough to want something more? Claudette left without waiting for an answer, and Elena sat at the piano, her hands shaking, understanding for the first time that her revenge might not be justice at all. It might just be more pain creating more pain in an endless cycle. The final masquerade. The truth seeker. Claudette's words haunted Elena for weeks. She found herself unable to sleep, unable to eat, unable to focus on her carefully laid plans for revenge. The doubt had planted itself like a seed in her mind, growing roots that strangled her certainty. One night, unable to bear it any longer, Elena went to her father's study. It was past midnight, and Thomas Hartwell was still awake, reviewing contracts by lamplight. He looked up, surprised to see his daughter in her nightgown and robe. Elena? What's wrong? Tell me about Marcus Crosswell, she demanded. Tell me the truth. Her father's face hardened. I told you the truth. He was a blackmailer. Was he? Or was he a father seeking justice for his wife's death? Thomas set down his pen slowly. Who told you about that? Does it matter? Did your factory workers set the fire that killed Daniel's mother? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Finally, her father spoke, his voice cold and measured. There was a strike. Things got violent. A fire started. Elizabeth Crosswell was in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was an accident. And Marcus Crosswell wanted compensation. He wanted me to admit fault. To pay damages. To take responsibility. Thomas stood, walking to the window. If I'd done that, Elena, the lawsuits would have buried us. Every worker's family, every accident at the factory, they all would have come forward. The company would have collapsed. So you had him killed. I had him silenced. Her father turned to face her, and for the first time, Elena saw something like regret in his eyes. I didn't order his death. I had him arrested on trumped-up charges. But prison is a dangerous place, and Marcus made enemies quickly. What happened to him? I didn't order it, but I didn't prevent it either. Elena felt sick. So Daniel's revenge was justified. Revenge is never justified, Thomas said sharply. It's a cancer that spreads and spreads until everyone is infected. Look at you, Elena. Look at what you've become in pursuit of it. Are you happy? Are you whole? Elena had no answer. She left the study and returned to her room, where she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her father was right. The woman looking back at her was hard, cold, unrecognizable. In destroying Daniel, she'd destroyed herself. But the machine of revenge she'd set in motion couldn't be stopped so easily. The Gala Trap. The annual Spring Arts Gala was the event of the season, held at the Grand Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Elena had been planning it for months, and every detail was designed to be the stage for her final confrontation with Daniel. She'd made sure both he and Claudette were invited as honored guests, celebrating Daniel's contributions to American art. But Elena had also invited 17 specific guests, the victims of Daniel's art fraud scheme. They didn't know why they were there, only that Elena Hartwell Ashworth had personally requested their presence. The ballroom was a spectacle of crystal chandeliers and silk-draped walls. A string orchestra played Vivaldi. Society's elite moved through the space like colorful birds, their jewels catching the light. Elena wore a gown of midnight blue velvet, her short hair styled in dramatic waves. She looked like a queen preparing for war. Bradford stood beside her, oblivious as always, making small talk with businessmen. He had no idea what his fiancée had planned. Neither did anyone else. Daniel and Claudette arrived fashionably late. Daniel wore a black tuxedo that made him look like a gentleman, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. He knew something was coming. Claudette looked pale but composed, her hand resting lightly on her husband's arm. Marcus Chin appeared at Elena's elbow. "Everything is ready," he murmured. "The projector is set up in the gallery room. The evidence packages are prepared. The Times reporter is in position." Elena nodded, her heart racing. This was it. The moment she'd been building toward for months. She could destroy Daniel completely, expose his crimes, ruin the Vandermeer family, and walk away vindicated. But Claudette's words echoed in her mind. "Are you brave enough to want something more?" The exhibition of sins. At 9 o'clock, Elena took the stage. The orchestra fell silent. 500 faces turned toward her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate the arts. As many of you know, I've recently become deeply involved in preserving artistic integrity and protecting collectors from fraud." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Daniel's face went white. "Tonight, I have a special presentation in the gallery room. A collection of works that tell a story about art, deception, and the price of ambition. I invite you all to join me." The crowd moved like a wave toward the gallery room. Elena had transformed it into an exhibition space, with paintings hung on temporary walls and a large screen set up at the far end. On one wall hung Daniel's early works, the raw, honest pieces from his struggling years. On another wall hung his current, commercial pieces. And on the third wall hung something that made the crowd gasp. Paintings that looked like masterpieces by famous artists, but with small plaques reading "Forgery" by Daniel Cross. Daniel tried to leave, but security guards, hired by Elena, blocked the exits. Claudette gripped his arm, her face stricken. Elena stood at the center of the room as the crowd pressed in. Marcus Chun operated the projector, throwing images onto the screen, documents, receipts, photographs showing Daniel selling forged paintings, testimony from art experts confirming the frauds. Daniel Cross, Elena's voice rang out, used his charm, his talent, and his connections to defraud 17 collectors in this room. He sold them forgeries worth over $500,000. He built his career on lies. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. The 17 victims looked at each other, then at Daniel, realization dawning on their faces. "But that's not all," Elena continued, and her voice grew harder. He targeted specific collectors, business associates of my father, Thomas Hartwell, as an act of revenge for something that happened 15 years ago. She nodded to Marcus, who switched to a new set of images. Documentation of the factory fire, Marcus Crosswell's arrest, the suspicious circumstances of his death in prison. Daniel's father died in prison after my father had him arrested. The fire that killed Daniel's mother was connected to labor disputes at Hartwell Industries. Daniel blamed my family, and he sought revenge by using me, by making me fall in love with him while he defrauded my father's associates. Daniel finally found his voice. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Elena cut him off. You used love as a weapon. You turned me into a tool for your revenge. You broke me because you were broken, and you thought that made it fair. The crowd was silent now, transfixed by the drama unfolding before them. The unexpected turn. Elena stood there, looking at Daniel across the crowded room, and something inside her cracked. Not broke, she'd been broken already, but cracked open, letting light in. But here's what I've realized, she said, her voice dropping to a quieter, more intimate tone. Revenge doesn't heal anything. It just creates more wounds. Daniel wanted revenge for his father, and it destroyed him. I wanted revenge for my heart, and it destroyed me. She walked toward Daniel, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. When she stood before him, she could see the fear in his eyes, but also something else, recognition. He saw in her what she'd seen in herself, a person consumed by the need to hurt because they'd been hurt. I have all the evidence to send you to prison, Elena said quietly. I have 17 victims ready to press charges. I have proof that will destroy not just your career, but your freedom. I have everything I need to annihilate you. So do it, Daniel said hoarsely. I deserve it. You do, Elena agreed. But what would that make me? My father destroyed your father in the name of business. You destroyed me in the name of revenge. If I destroy you, what's the difference? Where does it end? Claudette stepped forward. Elena, I'm not finished, Elena said, turning to address the entire room. I want everyone here to see the full picture. Yes, Daniel Cross committed fraud. But he did it because my father committed injustice first. My father had an innocent man imprisoned, and that man died. Daniel's mother burned to death in a fire that started because of labor disputes my father refused to address fairly. Thomas Hartwell pushed through the crowd, his face red with fury. Elena, what are you doing? I'm telling the truth, father. All of it. The truth you taught me to hide. The truth that's poisoned 3 generations of our families. She turned back to the crowd, her voice gaining strength. The victims of Daniel's fraud deserve restitution. I will personally repay every dollar lost, with interest. The paintings will be destroyed, and I will work with authorities to ensure no more forgeries enter the market. And what about him? One of the victims shouted, pointing at Daniel. He goes free? No, Elena said. He doesn't go free. But he doesn't go to prison either. There's a third option.